I got my notes on my smartphone, signs of the times, right? Just in case I get lost. That's basically all. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Hi. Hi, everyone. How's everybody? Everybody okay? Yeah? Nod? Awake? Coffee? Good? All right. So, this should be fun. This should kind of get your blood going, because I'm going to go through a quick history of smartwatches, and then right after that, we're going to talk about some of the current challenges, and then right after that, I'm going to go crazy with things about the future. I really only have one slide about the future, but you'll see it'll sum it all up, and it's really kind of cool. So now I have to figure out how this works. Let's see. If I go this way, what happens? Oh, look at that. Okay, so not quite smartwatch, but I'm going to start with the beginning of the wristwatch, right? So in 1868, some countess in Hungary wanted a watch she could wear around her wrist. And at the time, this was like, oh my God, no, sacrilege, you know? Everybody had pocket watches, and clocks were really on mantles of fireplaces. So Patek Philippe, one of the, at the time, biggest watchmakers, came up with this design for her. And so there it is, the first wristwatch. Next up, in 1910, this aviator called Alberto Santos wanted a watch he could check while he was flying his plane. Basically, while he was holding the yoke on his plane. And this is the early days of flight, so obviously being able to look, there were very few instruments on the airplane itself. Being able to look at something right on your wrist was a big deal. And the reason this watch is significant, it was made by Cartier, is because it is really the first kind of like default design for wristwatch as we know it today. It started in 1910. It's kind of hard to believe, right? So next up, we're kind of jumping like 5 decades, 6 decades almost, to the digital age. And you're going to say, what's the big deal about this watch? It just looks like a watch from the 60s. Yes, it does, except it has a quartz movement, meaning there's a crystal in there, you know, keeping the time, and a battery powering it. And it's essentially a digital brain to a mechanical watch. This is a huge step forward for the wearable watch, generally for the wrist. So, I like this one. I think this one's really cool. This one is very expensive. It was about $2,000 US in 1972. It was the first LED digital watch. So, not just crystal quartz, but instead of mechanical, having actually a digital display on this. And it was made by Pulsar. It's called a P1. They made a P2 right after that that was a lot more affordable. And around the same time, 1973, Seiko made the first LCD digital watch. You know, the liquid crystal display, the thing that essentially evolved into whatever, every smartphone and tablet we have today and TV we have today is using as a display technology. Well, there's AMOLED, but you know what I'm saying. Next up, I think this is the most badass watch on my slide deck, honestly. HP's calculator watch. Now, technically, Pulsar made a calculator watch in 1975, but it just doesn't look nearly as badass as this. So I thought, hey, why not put it up there? The 80s, oh, the 80s. Seiko decided to make a black and white television watch. And what you're seeing here is only a part of it, actually, because it had this cable that would hook up to the top. You see those pins, those contacts, and a long cable to a Walkman-sized device. If you guys maybe remember what a Walkman is, I hope you do. On your belt that had a TV tuner, and we're talking analog TV, NTSC. That's what this was, and it's kind of cool. So I put it up there. So as you can see, we're starting to get closer and closer to the smartwatch quite rapidly. And this is, I would say, kind of arguably the first. Well, there's a few others. There is, Seiko made one as well. There is a bunch from, I think Pulsar had one as well around that time. So the Casio Databank CD40 was the beginning of a whole series of watches that you could store stuff on, like a few characters, like an address or somebody's name, or eventually entire address books. Eventually you could sync it with your PC in the 90s over a serial connection. Remember those? RS-232? Okay. if you don't remember, it's okay. USB is a lot easier to use. 1999 was an interesting year because somebody named Samsung, who at the time was well known for other things than phones, and they were known for their appliances and TVs and stuff, decided that they were going to make a watch that was actually a cell phone. And this abomination you see here is the first watch phone. And so, we're talking very, very, very rudimentary, and battery life of like 20 minutes. But there it is. This is kind of an interesting one. Some of you might remember this one if you were around the kind of Linux world in the early 2000s, and that's the IBM Linux watch. So it was made by Citizen. So here's a little anecdote that's interesting, and that's in those days, IBM had a partnership with Citizen. And you're going to say, what for? Do you guys remember micro drives? There were these tiny little hard drives in the CF card. The CF cards you use on your high-end DSLR today? Imagine a hard drive in there. Somebody had to make it. Who better than to hire a watchmaker to make something mechanical that small? So IBM hired Citizen to make these micro drives. And in part of that partnership, this came out, because obviously Citizen makes watches. And Linux is awesome, as you know. Today, Android is based on that. A lot of our devices out there are running flavors of Linux, so this kind of was like a prediction of what we're going to get to next. This is interesting because I'm a camera buff, and I just had to put it up there. Casio made the first wrist camera. Are you ready for the specs? This is going to blow your mind. 120 by 120 pixels. Monochrome, yes. So basically totally and utterly useless. If you go on the internet, I'm sure you've heard of that thing, check out, there's an entire Flickr set of pictures taken with this device. It's pretty rad. I mean, bad and rad. Next, Fossil. Okay, so there's two things in this picture. There's Fossil, who made this Brisk PDA in 2003, but there's also Palm OS on this. You guys remember Palm OS, I hope, right? Yes? Okay. Good. So this is interesting. This is actually the first of at least two devices they made. They made another one in 2005. Again, we're getting closer and closer to today's smartwatches. This was already mentioned in, just before me, the Spot watches. This was interesting. So Microsoft came out with this technology called Microsoft Direct, which was designed to kind of push data to, mobile devices or an FM broadcast, similar to what RDS does for displaying song titles on your FM radio, for those of you who still listen to FM radio. And there's other technologies that are one-way data over FM, but this was one of them, and it was shuttered down in 2012. But for a while there, companies like Fossil, Tissot, and there's a couple more that I'm forgetting right now. But they made these watches, and you have to pay a subscription to get stock and weather to your watch. But it's kind of predicting this permanently connected state we live in today, which I think is a significant part of the present state of smartwatches. I only put this one here because it's very much a concept. I don't think it was sold, and if it was really outrageously expensive. An e-ink watch, I probably should have spelled that with capital E and capital I, since it was made with the display from the company e-ink. But I'm one of those people who just feels like it's not the same as Kleenex or Scotch tape, so forget it. I just spelled it with small letters. A cool idea, and a lot of people actually mistake Pebble's display, which is ePaper, which is a Sharp technology, with e-ink, which is what you have in your Kindle. They're different, and I'll get to that in a minute. But it's a very smart idea to put an e-ink display on a watch. And we'll get to that. Though I threw this one in there because it was the first phone watch or watch phone that I would consider wearing. Well, there was another one. This was at CES 2009. But in July 2009, Samsung made one as well. Of course, because LG and Samsung have to try to, compete and beat each other to the punch. So, but this was the first, and it's kind of cool because what it is it's take one of those early touchscreen phones that wasn't a smartphone, like a dumb phone with a touchscreen, capacitive, shrink it down to something you put on your wrist, with 3G and a front-facing camera to do video calls, and this is what you get. Pretty awesome. Was it useful? Did it work well? Nah. The idea was cool. And here we are, right? So this brings us to Pebble. 2012 for the Kickstarter, 2013 was the launch. I took this picture, actually, when I did my hands-on for Engadget at CES 2013, and I'm very proud of this picture. So I just put it up there. If you don't know what Pebble is, come talk to me after, but you should know what Pebble is if you're here. Unless you kind of happen to stumble on the wrong conference. I don't know. Anyway. The next one is also one of ours. It's the one we launched at CES this year. It's called Pebble Steel. It's the fancy, premium, classy version of Pebble. And, you know, obviously there's one other big player today, and that is Android Wear. And this is where we are now, today. This is where we've gotten. By the way, I want to give credit. A lot of these pictures are just, you know, Wikipedia, whatever I could find. But there are a few pictures, including this one, that I have to attribute to my good friends in the media that I worked with, either at Engadget or at Pocket Now or at Android Central. I believe I stole this one from Pocket Now. Unfortunately, I had to crop these to fit in my slides, so there's no watermark. So I figured I would let you guys know that I stole these. Let's talk about... So, just before I get into challenges, this is my version of the history, because you're going to say, where did the Wim watch go? And where did so many other kind of attempts at smartwatches go? Because there's been a lot in the last few years. I kind of decided to skip them because, you know, I think currently if you look at the market, there's really only two significant platforms. And that's Pebble and Android Wear. The Galaxy Gear platform doesn't really count in my eyes, but hey, it's too specialized. So, you know, I didn't want to go on with slides and show you more and more pictures of watches, but I think a lot of people don't know the history of where we got to up to about 2010, and then they do know it because it's much more current. So I thought I'd focus on stuff before. Let's talk about battery life. This is actually the inside of Pebble, the original Pebble. It is a picture that I have to credit to iFixit, our good friends who take everything apart. As you know from my bio, I used to take everything apart. I applaud that. I don't know if you can read it from where you are, but right there, it says 130 milliamp hour. Now, I'm an engineer, maybe you aren't, but 130 milliamp hour is nothing. You can suck that battery dry with a light bulb in probably a few minutes, probably half an hour at most. And I'm talking about your big bulb. It's a real challenge for wearables, battery life, right? You kind of intuitively know that. But at Pebble, we've taken this so seriously that our watch doesn't just need to be charged every day. It gets charged every 5 to 7 days. And we're not happy with that. We want it to go on for a lot longer than that. So the reason I put battery challenges first, because I think that's the number one challenge today in wearables, and it dictates a whole bunch of technologies that I'm going to talk about. So if you want to make a wearable device, your software and your hardware, both, need to be super efficient. That means picking the right display, the right processor. You know, that means picking the right radio communication technology, because it's a connected device. That also means your OS needs to be lightweight. Android's not going to cut it. Tizen's not going to cut it. They're heavyweight OSs. They're based on Linux. You need something based on a real-time OS. Something super lightweight that you can run on a Cortex M3 or M4. If you want to make a watch, I think that's the way to go. Because that means you can make a device without a display. That means you can scale up to a bigger device and put some video RAM and get a color display on there. So, battery life is a huge deal, and the other big challenge with battery life is connectors and how do you charge the device. So I'll talk about wireless charging in a second, because I think that's a solution. But right now, for us, the solution has been to create a magnetic connector that doesn't take up any real estate inside the watch, and it is waterproof. And you're going to say, why not use micro USB? Because it takes up space inside the watch, and it's not waterproof. You cannot make a micro USB connector that's waterproof, because the pins have to go through the plastic. So that is the problem, because if you look right now at the state of smartwatches, everyone has a custom connector pretty much. And it all turns into USB in some way, right? Samsung and LG have cradles. WIM had a cradle. We have a cable that is magnetic and kind of like a MagSafe, and the problem with that is we need to find a way to standardize. In the same way as it took a while for the phone industry to standardize on micro USB, other than Apple, although technically I think their connector lining is far superior technically, but it's a problem when you don't stick to standards, in our opinion, at Pebble. So micro USB would be the way to go, but we can't do it. So what we're trying to do now at Pebble is to rally a whole bunch of the other manufacturers and get them on board on a standardized connector that's waterproof, super low profile, and that's an interim solution for this problem of, the occasional times you need to plug in to charge. Now the other thing is this 130 milliamp hour battery is a pretty big deal, because it means that in 15 minutes of charge time, at 70 milliamp on a regular USB socket, which is nothing. It's like barely touching your laptop battery if you do this. You can get 1 day of battery life, 15-minute charge, right? So this is the kind of scale we're talking about with power consumption and why it matters. So the future. Well, I had to put a Palm Pre up there because, well, it was the first commercial product that was relatively successful with a wireless charger. And also a whole chunk of the WebOS team works at Pebble. And we love them all. So everybody who's used a Pre, I'm sure, enjoyed it. It was a great platform. Wireless charging is really great. Some companies in the wearable space have now managed to tame it so that it's not more efficient because there's an efficiency loss issue, but it's still faster to charge than it used to be. So almost as fast as wired. And that's the key. For a while, it wasn't fast enough. I couldn't get my day of battery life out of a 15-minute charge with wireless. But now you can. The problem on a watch is that if you make a watch waterproof, you don't want. It's tricky to have a plastic bag with a coil in it where basically the watch would rest to charge, because you get into the problem where if you're making a metal watch and it's waterproof, any flexing on the plastic means you have some issues at the seams and you lose your waterproofing. So there's a bunch of technical challenges that make a wireless charging solution difficult, primarily around the coil, the size of the coil, because it has to be a comparatively large surface area. But we're going to get there. And I think a few years from now, it's going to be pretty normal for you to throw your watch on a pad or your phone along with a bunch of other things and just have it charge very quickly. But we're not quite there yet. And I think the biggest problem right now is, and I'm going to call names because I'm like that, companies like AT&T who are working with PowerMat and trying to derail the de facto standard with wireless charging, which is Qi. Okay? So I don't really care about adopting one over the other, but one of them is more prevalent than the other already. Let's stick with it so we can grow the wearable business. Okay? And I'm saying this with love because AT&T is one of the awesome resellers that sell our watch. So I'm just calling them on that. Next, flexible batteries. Right? What if your band for your watch was a battery? Or had a battery in it? And some way to connect to the device, either wirelessly or through some contacts in the back somehow. We'll see a lot more of that. What if the watch itself wasn't like a watch today, like, kind of a traditional band that separates at standard size with it, the watch itself being contained in one box? What if it was like a gauntlet or a ring? These are the things we want to look at. I have a feeling personally, having been at Pebble for a year and having been in the mobile industry for a while, that it's going to take a while for people to be comfortable to try out new things like, a band that's goes fully around, has electronics all the way around inside of it. But it will eventually happen. People will do it. And then you'll have a bigger surface area for display, more battery space, and flexible batteries are going to help a lot. Next up, this is my arm. Actually, I took this picture. I'm a bit of photography buff, as I said. So, displays. Right now, it's a pick your poison situation for displays for wearables. And the poisons are, on one side of the camp, you have Pebble with a black and white, daytime readable, low power display that's backlit at night. On the other side, you have awesome looking high resolution color, IPS, which is an LCD technology, or AMOLED displays that are completely not readable in daylight and that use more power. That is your choice today. There is no magic pill. You have to pick one. Just mark my words. For the next 2 years, wearables are going to be suffering from this problem. There's no other solution. You can crank up the IPS backlight or the AMOLED, output, but your battery is going to suffer radically. Because if you notice, there's no smartwatch out there right now that is as bright using the same technology as a phone in daylight. And there's a reason for that. They can't do it. The battery would drain in an instant. So, until then, solutions like what we've done, are a compromise. We'd like to have color. We'd like to have more resolution. But in daylight, you can't beat it. And most of the time, for a watch at least, you're not using it when you're indoors very much because you have your phone. You're generally using it when you're in a rush walking somewhere outdoors. So we think, we picked that side of the fence. Now, nothing stops us from making 2 watches. And perhaps we are. But there is a choice to make right now. And that's what I want to talk to you about. That's the dilemma. So e-ink is like ePaper, but different. So ePaper, this that we use, is an LCD technology. It's what they call a memory LCD. When it's not moving like this right now, well, between the 22 and 23 second mark down here, it's consuming microamps, which means it can stay on for a really long time and not draw anything. But if you pull the power, it goes blank, not like e-ink. And as soon as it refreshes, it draws a bit more, and that's what's actually costly in terms of battery life. So, you're going to say, what about color ePaper? Duh. Well, Mirasol exists. It's an awesome technology by Qualcomm. I know Rob's going to be talking to you guys tomorrow. He's a good friend, and he's awesome. They make a good technology, but it's still too expensive and not quite there yet for mass production. I mean, there's a bunch of issues. But it's going to happen. Once that happens, we almost are going to get our pie and eat it too, because we'll have the best of both worlds. Another one thing that I think I want to put on your radar, this flexible stuff is going to play a significant role. Not just the batteries, but the displays. Again, if you make a gauntlet type design, and we've seen it with Samsung's really awesome looking Gear Fit, being able to curve the display is a cool thing. Now, the flexible thing is always confusing to people. They think they're going to be able to just flex the device. Maybe eventually. But in the more near future, it's about being able to get shapes and curves that are not normally attainable. And also shock resistance. If you drop something that's flexible, it's going to bend with the shell of your device. Input challenges. I put this up because I find it hilarious. So this company just came out with they've had this keyboard for phones for a while, but it just came out with this keyboard for Android Wear, and I think it's ridiculous. Nobody's going to type on their watches, in my opinion. It's not the right device for that. So what are your input modalities? What are they, right? Well, buttons. That's what we have. Touch screens. That's what some watches have. Sometimes both. And I'll give you the advantages and drawbacks of all. And then the last one is voice. Now, remember, your smartwatch is not yet going to replace your phone, or maybe never going to replace your phone. So why would it have a keyboard? And as technology gets better, voice recognition should get better. Now you're going to say, I don't want to talk to my watch. But trust me, once you start talking and it does a good job of recognizing, for short things, it's going to make a lot more sense than this craziness. So, what I'm saying is basically, there are 3 things you can do. Buttons, touchscreens, and voice today. Buttons are super awesome. I'll tell you why. They seem old school, but they're really easy to waterproof, because it's been done for years. They work underwater. Our watch is waterproof to 165 feet. Lots of people go surfing and swimming with it all the time. You can't do a touchscreen underwater. There are a few that work now, but it's not a solution. Gloves. You're going skiing. Or you're wearing gloves coming in it's cold outside, you get in your car or whatever. You know the problem right now in your car. The screen doesn't work if it's capacitive. Same problem with these watches. So, I think touchscreens are important. In an ideal world, I'd like to see a hybrid of buttons and touchscreens. Touchscreens, the problem is that you have to look to know what you're doing and feel acknowledgement. I mean, you can vibrate the watch. But with a button, you get that tactile feedback that instantly tells you, from memory right now, I can dismiss notifications on my watch. I just did it if I had one up, I don't even know. I didn't look at my watch. That's what buttons are for. So, buttons are not going to go anywhere. And then, of course, we have voice and touchscreens. This is important. Voice, well, I label it assistance because there's more to voice than just being able to say, hi honey, I'll be late. I'm stuck on the highway in traffic. Sometimes you want to say things like, set a timer, or remind me when I get home to buy milk. Assistance, intelligence, context, what Android does with Google Now, what Cortana does from Microsoft, what Siri does from Apple. Those are what I call assistants. And they're going to be so prevalent, but you need to trust the tech world right now and give us your data, because without it, we cannot make this happen. If you want your smartwatch or whatever other wearable to really be smart and really be able to do things for you in an intelligent way, you need to start agreeing to giving your data away. Because that's the only way we're going to be able to predict what you want to do. Context is key. It is absolutely the most significant thing in the future of computing. And if we don't do it right, and what I mean by do it right is, privacy and security are super important. But we also need to start to trust our technology. Okay? Connectivity challenges. The only practical technology we have with a 130 milliamp hour battery, or even a 300 milliamp hour battery like the Gear Live from Samsung, is Bluetooth. In fact, the Snapdragon 400 platform that the Android Wear watches is based on can do Wi-Fi out of the box. If they turn that Wi-Fi radio on, that thing would die in half a day. So, Bluetooth is our only thing today that works efficiently. And when I say Bluetooth, I mean one specific Bluetooth implementation, LE, low energy, also popularized by Bluetooth 4.0. Right now, the only way we can have these devices hop onto the network is via some sort of router. And the router for Pebble and for Android Wear is your phone. And perhaps one day it won't be a phone. Perhaps one day it'll be a credit card-sized device that you charge once a week that has an LTE radio and a Wi-Fi radio and acts as a mesh network node for your personal area network. And all your devices will connect and they'll automatically be able to get to the network in some way or another through this little box you carry with you. Or maybe it'll be built into a device so you don't need the box anymore. Maybe you'll still want to carry a phone and it'll be a phone. But maybe your phone will just be a display. Because you want a larger display, because sometimes typing is faster. In the same way as you maybe carry a tablet and a laptop. Right? So, personal area networks is kind of what I'm talking about. It's mesh networks that ad hoc work, are secure, and work around your body, very short range, very low energy, and can tap onto the internet through some sort of routing mechanism. That is currently the future and the present, and, the foreseeable future for connectivity for wearables. Usability challenges. I took this picture. This is my spouse's wrist with a white pebble plastic at the beach in San Francisco. It's sandy and wet, and we don't care. That's super important. Anybody who makes a wearable today that's IP67, are you kidding me? IP67? That's barely dust and water resistant. I mean, these are things that are going to be stepped on while on the beach in sand in a puddle. You better do better than IP67. So, waterproofing is a huge deal. And there's a bunch of other usability issues, to keep in mind as well. You need to keep things simple. Right now, my beef with a lot of the tool technology that I use every day is that it's not simple enough. With Pebble, we really try to keep things simple. By that I mean, the touchscreen we felt was not going to cut it because you need to look at the display, and it doesn't work in some situations, like underwater with gloves. Take it out. Take it out. I mean, look, we know it's a valid technology for some cases, but it's not going to get the job done there. So what I mean by usability is if we want to go beyond us, the early adopters, if we want to go beyond us, the tech-savvy users, we sell our watch at Target. The people who buy a smartwatch at Target don't want to have to do anything complicated. They want to go home, have a seamless pairing experience with their phone, and live their lives, and they want it to add value to their lives. Notifications alone is value right now. A busy mom that has to carry grocery bags getting texts from her partner saying, I'm running late, and not having to pull out the phone when it vibrates, that's gold right there. You've sold a watch. It's that simple. Does it have to be more complicated? No. So perhaps instead of worrying about these complex modes of operation, we should focus on simplicity and usability. Design's a big challenge. I put the Moto 360 up there because I'm a big fan of the design. And, I've talked with Lior Ron, who's the head of the Moto 360 product at Motorola. Unlike what you'd like to think, we're all good friends. We talked about the challenges and what they tried to do. And, the only thing that bums me out a little bit is the fact that they had to put the connector somewhere to go to the board because there's so little bezel. So the display is not fully round. But look at this. It's gorgeous, right? Of course, it's not readable in daylight, in bright sunlight, which is, arguably not going to be readable. But that's a bummer. But you know what? Design matters. I don't think, other than Pebble Steel right now that we have, and Moto 360, that we have a smartwatch that looks good. The original Pebble, in my opinion, is okay. It's plastic, it's sporty, it's fun, it's got colors, but it's not beautiful. And more than ever with wearables, it's super personal, right? You want this thing to reflect who you are. Look at it. I customized a band on my Pebble Steel. I'm going to dismiss the notifications without looking. Look at that. It's a silicone band made by a third party, not by Pebble. It normally comes with a leather band or a metal band. I don't like metal. Leather is great, but it doesn't wear well with water, so I got a silicone band and I customized. Customization is super important. Gorgeous designs, choices of colors, materials, shapes, and sizes. Most of the wearables, at least the watches today, are way too big. This is barely starting to become close to the right size for most people. Okay? And so making smaller means less battery, less room for battery, less room for display, less room for technology. So you got to keep that in mind when you make your wearables. And then there's ecosystem challenges. How do you get these apps on there? How do you get the functionality on there? How do you get developers excited about your platform? This is the Pebble App Store on both iOS and Android. And, that's kind of the way we put our feet in the water with this. I think what Android Wear is doing is interesting, where the Android app automatically installs its Android Wear component on the watch when you install the main app. But the difference is that with Pebble, there are some apps that don't exist on the phone at all. We can make apps that just run on the watch standalone. We can also make apps that run on the watch with an internet connection and use the phone, our app on the phone as just a router and a JavaScript engine to do the heavy lifting of, JSON stuff. So, building an ecosystem is a challenge. And the only way we're going to do this is like the battery connection thing. It's by being open and working together. That's why Pebble is cross-platform. That's why Pebble supports Android 4.0 and up. And iOS 7, iOS 8, and even iOS 6 if you want limited functionality. So building an ecosystem that lets other partners work together with you rather than trying to completely compete with them for everything is the way to go. It's proven itself in history to to boost competition in the long run. Because you can now differentiate on things that don't piss off your customers, right? So, having a strong developer community, having, a good ecosystem is important. Pebble's an open platform. We have 15,000 registered developers. It's completely free to become a developer. We have about 3,200 apps in the App Store. Most of them don't suck. And then we have 400,000 plus devices on wrists out there. You're starting to see a pretty decent ecosystem when you have those numbers. And what's important is that we're starting to gather data that is invaluable. We know things about our users and their patterns and their habits that are going to define what we do next and distinguish us from the competition in a significant way, because we've been doing this for 6 years, basically. So, I'm almost done. Where do we go from here? And I say, the next logical thing is implants, right? I mean, wearables are wearables. You put glasses on every day. You might wear a watch. I think it doesn't really get interesting until you implant the stuff in your body, because then you can really have a nice symbiotic relationship with your technology. Now, it might be scary. That's why I use this slide, because it's kind of a hat tip to the fact that most people don't even consider implants. But what if, for example, you could tattoo your arm like I have a tattoo on my arm, but instead of ink, it was nanotechnology, and that nanotechnology could turn into a display that could display anything. I don't need a watch anymore. I have a display on my arm. How much cooler is that? It's big. If I want, it can take up my whole arm. I can watch a video on it. So, I think, as we go forward, we have to keep our minds open and the doors open to all kinds of possibilities that go beyond the stuff we can conceive today in terms of wearable. And I think right now, when I hear wearables, I hear implants, I hear Internet of Things, I hear a whole bunch of other things that I consider to be quote-unquote wearable. Because Internet of Things is really this weird buzzword, but it means that you have a device on you or on your car or in your house that is connected. And if that device is like a trivial device, maybe it's a heart rate monitor that can talk to my Pebble, but I don't wear it all the time because I only wear it when I'm running, right? Or maybe it's I'm diabetic and I have a glucose monitor. Maybe an implant is a solution for the best glucose monitoring technology, right? And again, there's people experimenting with medications that have microchips in them so they can keep track of how long it takes for these microchips to go through the body. Those are implants, technically. So, that's why I put this up, because I want you guys to think about all these different things that are quote-unquote wearables. So that's it for me. I'm sure you'll have lots of questions. I know this is not technically going to have a Q&A, but I put it out there so that you can email me if you have questions. Talk to me on Twitter. My handle's Tankgirl without the vowels. And then, of course, questions. I'll be around most of the day. I've got a bunch of meetings with the media, and then hoping to frolic and say hi to everyone. So, come and get me. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll talk to you later. Cheers.